People don't walk into faith communities empty handed. This was a recent Substack post that I made regarding trauma champions for church leadership. The article was called When the Congregation Carries Wounds: How Faith Communities Can Become Trauma Informed Places of Healing. People come into churches carrying invisible stories: grief, abuse, addiction, betrayal, anxiety, spiritual doubts. On Sunday mornings, during mosque prayers, temple gatherings, and Wednesday night Bible studies, people are often searching for something deeper than doctrine. They're searching for safety and community. Faith based organizations are often the first places that people turn to in crisis, before therapists, before hospitals, before anyone else. Research from the National Core Morbidity Survey, a nationally representative study of over 8,000 Americans, found that roughly 1 in 4 people seeking mental health support turn to clergy or religious leaders first, a pattern that's confirmed by decades of follow up research, including multiple studies by Baylor University's Dr. Matthew Stanford. That means your pastor, rabbi, imam, or youth director may be a trauma responder long before they think of themselves as one. Yet most faith based communities never have been trained for this role. They operate with deep compassion and genuine care, of course, but without the trauma informed frameworks that can help transform compassion into sustainable, effective healing practices. They're liable to re traumatize these individuals all over again, or it creates even bigger issues within the church. Here's what trauma informed ministry really means. Trauma informed care is not a clinical technique reserved only for therapists. At its heart is a lens for understanding human behavior. It recognizes that difficult behaviors, emotional withdrawal, anger, addiction, or spiritual struggle are often not moral failures, but adaptive responses to past wounds. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, outlines 6 core principles of trauma-informed care: safety, trustworthiness, peer support, collaboration, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural humility. These principles translate naturally into the life of a congregation. Take safety, for example. A trauma survivor sitting quietly in a pew needs to know their story will not be shared publicly without consent. They need to trust that their vulnerability will not become a sermon illustration. They need to feel that judgment has been left at the door. Emotional safety is not just a therapeutic concept. It is the actual environment that Jesus described when he said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Likewise, the trauma informed principle of empowerment and voice aligns deeply with the theological belief that every human being bears dignity, agency, and sacred worth. When faith communities shift from fixing people to walking with people, something powerful happens. They stop unintentionally re traumatizing, and they start becoming places of restoration. Here's the hidden costs of our good intentions. Many trauma survivors have been hurt, not by strangers, but by the very institutions they trusted the most. Across many traditions, faith communities have sometimes responded to suffering with well meaning but harmful messages, telling abuse survivors to forgive too quickly, spiritualizing mental illness instead of seeking help, shaming those struggling with addiction, silencing painful stories to protect the reputation of the institution. None of these responses is usually malicious, but they can deepen wounds rather than heal them. Trauma researcher Dr. Judith Herman, the author of The Trauma and Recovery, reminds us that healing requires acknowledgement before restoration. When someone shares a traumatic story and the first response is scripture before listening or prayer before validation, the unintentional message can be, "Your pain makes us uncomfortable." That gap between intention and impact is exactly where trauma informed training becomes essential. The good news here, most faith based communities already possess the raw materials for trauma informed care. They understand community, ritual, compassion, witness, and meaning making. They simply needed a framework to channel those strengths more intentionally. Here's three practical shifts that faith communities can make today. First, train your gatekeepers. In many congregations, the first person someone speaks to is not the pastor, it's the usher, the youth leader, the small group facilitator, the church secretary. These frontline faith workers shape the emotional climate of a community. Equipping them with basic trauma awareness, how to listen without fixing, how to recognize signs of distress, and how to make a warm referral can transform the culture of an entire organization. Sometimes a 2-hour training can change the trajectory of someone's life. Second, audit your language. Words matter, especially in spiritual environments. Certain phrases that are meant to encourage can land as dismissive for trauma survivors. God won't give you more than you can handle. Just pray harder. You need more faith. Trauma informed communities learn to speak differently. They validate suffering as real without turning it into a spiritual deficiency. They create a space for lament, grief, and struggle, the same themes found throughout sacred texts. Hope becomes an invitation and not a command. Number 3, build bridges to professional care. Pastoral care and clinical care are not competitors. They're partners. Healthy faith communities develop relationships with trauma-informed therapists, counselors, and social workers in their region. This creates a referral network that supports the whole person: body, mind, spirit, and community. Faith leaders remain the spiritual guides. Mental health professionals provide clinical expertise. Together, they form a continuum of care. Let's have a little moment of reflection, shall we? Pause for a moment before we continue. Think of someone in your congregation who might be carrying a story you cannot see. Not someone who is visibly struggling, but someone quietly sitting in the back row. Now ask yourself a different question. Not what advice should I give them, but what would help them feel safe enough to tell me their story? That posture, humble, patient, non anxious presence is the beginning of a trauma informed ministry. Faith communities are uniquely positioned to become some of the most healing environments in society. They already offer belonging, meaning, ritual, and moral vision, the very elements that support trauma recovery. But without trauma awareness, those same environments can unintentionally reinforce shame, silence, or isolation. This is why trauma informed training for faith based organizations is becoming increasingly important. Not to turn pastors into therapists, but to help ministries become places where wounded people can breathe again. If you would like some more information on trauma informed care, to become trauma informed care certified, to also look at the important role of compassion fatigue recovery in your life, as in who helps the helpers, I encourage you to get more information through my newsletter at traumachampions.com or to go to my website at familyhealer.tv. Thank you so much for the work that you do.